The Dark Night and the White Moon. The night began like any other winter night in the small town of Bellwood, somewhere in the quiet heart of America. By 9 o'clock, every porch light had disappeared behind a thick curtain of darkness. The streets were empty, the stores were locked, and the old church bell had already counted the hour. Above it all hung a strange white moon, brighter than anyone in town remembered seeing. 72-year-old Daniel Harper stood at his kitchen window watching it. He had lived in Bellwood for more than 50 years, but that moon made the familiar town look like a different place. Its pale light covered the roofs and empty road with a silver glow. Daniel was about to close the curtain when he noticed something moving near the old railway station. At first, he thought it was a deer. Then it stopped. A tall white shape stood beneath the moon. Daniel leaned closer. The shape did not move. It faced the house, as if it knew he was watching. He stepped back. "Probably just a shadow," he whispered. But then the telephone rang. Daniel froze. Nobody called his landline anymore. His daughter used a cell phone, and the telephone had been silent for years. He slowly picked it up. There was no voice, only a soft sound like wind passing through distant trees. Then, very quietly, a woman whispered his name. "Daniel!" He dropped the receiver. For a moment, the house was completely silent. Then the telephone rang again. This time, Daniel did not answer. He looked toward the window. The white figure was gone, but something else had appeared. A line of pale footprints crossed the snow from the railway station toward his front door. Daniel heard nothing. He locked the door, checked every window, and turned on every light. Yet the brighter the house became, the darker the corners seemed. At midnight, the power suddenly failed. Bellwood disappeared into darkness. Daniel reached for a flashlight, but before he could find it, moonlight entered the room through the window. The white moon was directly above the house, and on the floor, beside Daniel's chair, he saw a second set of footprints. They ended exactly where he was standing. Daniel remembered his mother's warning. When the moon turned white, voices of the dead could return. He'd laughed at it for decades. Then he heard 3 knocks upstairs. A 4th knock came from inside the bedroom wall. Daniel stared into the darkness. The night had only just begun. Daniel did not move. The knocking came again, but this time it was from the front door. 3 slow knocks. Daniel grabbed his flashlight and looked through the glass. No one was there, only snow. Then he noticed the footprints outside. They were leading away from his house, toward the old railway station. Daniel knew he should stay inside. Every sensible thought told him to lock the door and wait until morning. But something inside him said that this strange night was connected to a memory he had buried for 40 years. He put on his coat and stepped into the snow. The town looked abandoned beneath the white moon. No cars passed. No dogs barked. Even the trees seemed frozen in place. At the railway station, Daniel found the old waiting room unlocked. Inside, a wooden bench stood beneath a dusty clock. The clock had stopped at 12:17. Daniel stared at it. Then he remembered. 40 years earlier, on a night almost exactly like this one, a train had derailed outside Bellwood. Several passengers had died. Among them was a young woman named Clara. She had been traveling home to see her little daughter. Daniel had been there that night. He had found Clara beside the damaged railway tracks. Before she died, she had given him a small wooden box and begged him to deliver it to her daughter. But Daniel had been young and afraid. He never did. He carried that secret for 40 years. Suddenly, a cold wind moved through the station. Daniel looked toward the platform. A woman stood beneath the white moon. She wore an old-fashioned coat, and the pale light seemed to pass through her. Daniel could barely breathe. "Clara?" The woman smiled sadly. "I waited a long time." Daniel lowered his head. "I was afraid," he whispered. Clara looked toward the dark railway tracks. "So was I." Then she pointed toward the trees. Daniel followed her gaze. Beneath an old pine tree rested a small wooden box. His heart began to pound. He walked toward it and slowly opened the lid. Inside was a faded photograph of a little girl and a handwritten letter. Clara had written the letter for her daughter, but she had never lived long enough to deliver it. Daniel held the letter against his chest. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Clara smiled. "You can still make it right." The next morning, Daniel found Clara's daughter, now an elderly woman living in a nearby town. He gave her the letter. She read it silently, tears running down her face. For the first time in 40 years, Daniel felt the weight of his secret disappear. That night, he returned home and looked through his kitchen window. The darkness was ordinary again. High above Bellwood, the moon was white and peaceful. Daniel smiled. Then, from somewhere beyond the old railway station, he heard a soft voice carried by the wind. "Thank you, Daniel." He closed his eyes. The moon slowly disappeared behind a cloud. And for the first time in 40 years, Daniel slept peacefully.